Hello, Linda Godfrey. Welcome to the DTV show, the Dimensions TV show. I'm very pleased to have you on. My viewers geographically range from all over English-speaking countries in the world to French-speaking countries who follow my shows and who are bilingual or fluent in English. You're an author, investigator, and artist. You're one of the America's foremost authorities on modern-day monsters, and you wrote 17 books on strange creatures, phenomena, and people, on werewolves, which you call dogmen, and we'll talk about that, hauntings, and the paranormal, including real wolfmen, True Encounters in Modern America, American Monsters, and also Sightings in America and Weird Michigan. You've appeared on many national TV shows such as the History Channel's Monster Quest, Inside Edition, and Sean Hannity, and you have been a guest on radio shows such as Coast to Coast, AM, and so forth. We pay tribute to actually Art Bell, who was on Coast to Coast, who left us recently, passed away. You heard about that, right, Art Bell?
Oh, yes. I was very, very sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. And also your latest book is Monsters Among Us, an exploration of otherworldly Bigfoots, wolfmen, portals, phantoms, and odd phenomena. And tonight we'll speak about the dogmen, mainly, which are werewolf true encounters and sightings, but not only. We'll also discuss, if we have time, mystical, legendary, cryptid creatures and their secret portals and doorways to travel through dimensions. Well, this is a good thing. We're on Dimensions TV. So you're and that's amazing. I saw you on featured in a French show called Should We Believe in Vampires and Werewolves? I think that it was on TV in 2012, and I saw that on YouTube recently. And you were featured in an older show from American TV, but in that French documentary. First off, welcome again, Linda. And do you want to add anything about your background and what got you interested in those strange phenomenon?
Well, first, thanks again for having me. I'm really appreciative of being here with you and your listeners tonight. And I had sort of a strange beginning. It wasn't that I had always thought I wanted to search for weird animals, but I was working as a journalist and an artist and cartoonist at a small newspaper. In fact, had just started as a reporter when it came to my attention that people in my own hometown of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, were seeing what they described as a werewolf just outside of town. And when I managed to catch up with them and interview some of them, they didn't seem crazy, because I didn't believe it at all at first, but they did not seem like they were lying. They did not seem crazy. There did not appear to be collusion between them. There were at least 7 or 8 different witnesses that I knew of right at the beginning, and that number grew over the several weeks that I took to investigate it. And then we ran the story thinking it would just be some local diversion, and instead it went national and then international within weeks. And it was just sort of a crazy thing, and I still thought it would go away, although I was very interested because I really felt at that point that the people were seeing something, and that was fortified by having hundreds of people begin contacting the newspaper, writing me, going on other shows, saying they had seen it. And this was pre-internet. This was 1991-92, that New Year's Eve weekend when it all started out. So it wasn't like everybody could just go online and things are going viral. They were having to kind of hear of this, find it here and there, sort it out, and then use snail mail or landline phones to reach me at the newspaper office. So I realized that this was something that was not a little local phenomenon, that many, many people, perhaps as many as there were Bigfoot sighters, were seeing this thing. I had been unaware of the fact that people sometimes saw what looked like upright wolves, timber wolves, or large husky type or German Shepherd type dogs walking upright, and not just for a few steps, but running that way, hunting that way, carrying prey around and acting as if that was their normal way of going. And I worked for that newspaper for 10 years. During that time, I kept receiving the reports from people, and also requests from media because there weren't too many other researchers who were really interested in upright canines at that time. You know, it was all Bigfoot, Loch Ness, that sort of thing. So after 10 years, I felt like I had an obligation to put it in a book and have it written down somewhere where people could access it and find everything that I, you know, had learned up to that point. Well, and then it just went from book to book to book. The more that I put out there, the more demand there was. And then, you know, when all of the Yahoo groups and then the Google groups and Facebook became big, the last 3 or 4 years, I would say perhaps, it really just kind of exploded and got, you know, just beyond anything I ever imagined. And the thing is, I still, 26 years later after I began this, I still receive reports usually every week, and so do other people now. You know, it's kind of expanded, which is good because before there only being one of me, it gets pretty hard to keep up, you know. So here I am still at it, and I actually have my 18th book at the publisher waiting for their final acceptance and editing and that kind of thing. And it just seems like when I think I have said everything I have to say about it, another door or window opens up, and then there's another whole reality to investigate regarding these creatures.
So you receive witness accounts about every week, you said, regarding Dogman, or?
Usually, yeah, that would probably be the average. Some weeks I get more, you know,
Mhm.
last month, one day I got three in a week, and then I had two in another day, the other one's one, or it averages out to about one a day usually, which if you go over 26 years, that's a lot. And
That's a
they
lot.
aren't all
Mhm.
equal. Yeah, they aren't all equal. They aren't all something that I would use, you know, but even so, when you pair those down, it's still a pretty substantial number.
It's very substantial. If we compare with ET experiencers that what I'm used to, and not everyone comes forward and knows where to testify or send their testimony, and they're a bit
Yes,
afraid
great point.
of their family members or workmates and so forth, and they usually don't
Yes.
like to be considered as fools or or crazies. So where geographically are they located? And those witness accounts, are they mainly from Wisconsin, or all over the states, or North America, or elsewhere?
Oh no, they're all over North and South America and even the world. You know, I've received them from different parts of Europe and Virgin Islands, you name it. They're just they seem to be everywhere that that type of natural wild animal could be. You know, you don't really see them so much in the jungles of Peru, but they've got their own sort of cryptids. But your point about people not always reporting is very well taken because that is so true. I really believe that it's just a minority that are ever recounted back to investigators or researchers like me. I think that most people who see them either sort of go into self-denial and tell themselves that was a dream or oh it must have been something else, or like you said they tell one person or two people and are so made fun of that they resolve they will never tell anybody else and they don't, or they're afraid of their jobs. Many people will be highly educated or people with high security clearances, and they will say, I cannot be known, you know, I would lose my job definitely if anyone found out I said this. Or, like you said, they don't know where to go. Even though it's on the internet, some people still aren't sure who's safe, who isn't safe to talk to, you know. So you're very right, and for that reason alone, a lot of reports just kind of sit there in people's minds and hearts, and people say that it stays with them, you know, all every day they think of it.
Um, let's start with the description of those creatures. Well, Dogman. Dogman. Uh, who started by naming him Dogman instead of werewolves, which is the old the old expression for it?
Well, I think that it's just sort of something that evolved, Mark. In the beginning, I didn't know exactly what to call them because I did not think that they really sounded like traditional medieval style werewolves. They looked like everybody described them the same way as being upright, walking on their toe pads, but only on their hind legs, and having heads like German Shepherds or Timber Wolves with pointy ears on top of their heads, long snouts, big muzzles with fangs, claws on the end of their slightly elongated paws. In fact, sometimes people would say their paws seemed so much bigger, they looked almost more like hands, but there were claws on the end of them. Covered with usually dark brown to gray fur, sometimes black. The color would vary the same amount that you'd expect in any natural wolf pack. And they really just look like some sort of very large dog or timber wolf walking naturally on and running, chasing things, I might add, carrying things in their forelimbs, um, which is kind of an astounding thing. So that's basically what everyone was describing. And as for myself, I said right away from the get-go, I did not believe they were werewolves. No people were being killed. No one was being really menaced. They weren't uh, correlated to the full moon or anything like that. Um, that's why I coined the term beast of Bray Road, because I thought, well, beast is sort of a generic thing. Beast can really literally be anything from a mouse to a dragon. It's just some kind of animal type creature. So I chose Beast of Bray Road also because it had that nice alliteration with all the bees. And that kind of stuck for a while. My favored term at first was man wolf, because I thought it didn't have all that Hollywood baggage that werewolf did. And then it came to my attention that Michigan had the very same creature that's had sort of an outbreak earlier in 1987, only no one really had heard about it. And they called it the Dog Man, because there were some old logging camp um, ballads or whatever that used that term Dogman. And so the Michigan Dogman became known. And I think when the internet came in, it just sort of took precedence for a name, because it was a little more definite, and because these things did look so much like they had the head of a German Shepherd in so many of the reportings. I think that's where it came. It is not that in most cases there appear to be human features other than the elongated paws that look somewhat like hands. They still have wolf heads, tails, fur-covered bodies. Now, there are some exceptions that I don't think are the same phenomenon at all. There are different types of canine creatures, just as there are different types of humans, human ghosts, human uh, ghouls or phantoms, human, all sorts of things. It's a number of different types of upright canine phenomena, but most of the ones that are described are just as I mentioned in the beginning,
Right.
looking totally canine but upright.
I shared a picture that I've gotten on the internet called the Barn Dogman. I don't know if it's authentic, genuine, or a fake, CGI thing. I don't know. What do you think? Are you able to see it?
Yes, yeah, I've seen that one, of course, quite a few times, and
Mm-hmm.
there are a couple of these going around just recently.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one that's well, it's been shown to be an exact screen clipping from one of the creatures in Beast of Bray, or excuse me, in the Harry Potter series, where it's in another similar setting. This one I think is older, and I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it a lot. The first time I saw it was maybe 6 or 7 years. Somebody showed it to me at a conference, and the person said they were also best friends with Taylor Swift. So I wasn't putting, but they said this happened. They said that this was their uncle's place down in Tennessee somewhere. And of course, every time I would see it on the internet, it would have a different location, which is one sure tip that you're looking at some kind of a
Fake.
photoshopped
Right.
fake thing. Yeah, and I believe that a lot of people have exposed this one, and that image
Mm.
is traceable to some other online image.
Yes, that's good to know. Actually, there's so many fakes out there of anything that's cryptid or UFO and even ghosts and so forth. There's so many fakes that are trying to hide the real phenomena and make it look like it's totally inexistent. What where do they usually encounter those dogmen? You said North America, South America, all over the globe, basically, but some regions have more sightings than others.
Yeah, it does seem that the area surrounding the Great Lakes in the middle of the United States, if you look at a map of these things, and I've mapped them out, and there are a couple of maps out there on the internet, you will see clusters all around the Great Lakes going up into Canada and down around over to New York State, past Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania. But from those, there are spurs of hiding, or excuse me, spotting highlights that branch out down toward the west, down south toward Texas and Georgia, and then off to the east through Ohio and Pennsylvania and all the way up into New York State. So they seem to like water. They seem to like to be near fresh water, particularly. They seem to like forested areas or areas where there are crops that grow high, like the cornfields all around the Midwest. Are places where there are numerous sightings every year when the corn gets very high. And it seems to be all about where there's good prey, deer, turkeys, all sorts of prey animals that they can eat. They seem to have the same sort of appetite as wolves do, as normal wolves do. Whereas it's a little different from Bigfoot, because Bigfoot seems to like elevation variation, where there's mountains and valleys, and not only the prey, but they also seem to be a lot more vegetation oriented. They like root crops and berries and things like that. Whereas the dogmen, they've been seen a few times, seeming to have some interest in berries or a few other easily reachable things, but generally they're out for the meat.
Right. And well, Bigfoot or sometimes associated with ufological events or creatures coming from a different planet. So I think it was Mardek or something like that. Maldek, the planet Maldek. I don't know if you've heard of it. The Sasquatch would be coming from there, and we would have part of their DNA, and it's all the ufology talk and topics that they speak about quite often. But do you are there specific circumstances when the person, the human being, um, does encounter those creatures? Is there a specific moment in his life, or psychologically speaking, or circumstances, certain events in his life that trigger the encounters? Have you noticed that?
I don't really notice that too much. Most of the time, people who write me seem to be just going about their regular lives. Sometimes it's after they move into a new house, and they're not familiar with the territory, and then they spot this thing lurking, at their tree line in their backyard or something like that. But so many times it's somebody who's just driving along. They're on their way somewhere, and very often other people in their car will just encounter one of these things, either crouched by the roadside eating roadkill, or sometimes running alongside the car, or they'll see it just run across the road in front of them. That's probably one of the most usual things that happen. And then occasionally, if it's the type that is they're near their home somewhere, sometimes they'll feel that it followed them home, and they'll have subsequent sightings. Most of the time, it's a one-off. They never see it again. They're left to sit and wonder, why did I have that glimpse of that thing that shouldn't exist? They're usually freaked out because they cannot identify it, more so for that reason than any other. Although the interesting thing is that over and over and over again, I'll hear this. It'll be like the last thing they'll write me or tell me. They'll say, I didn't know if I should mention this to you. I didn't want you to think I'm crazy, but it felt like when it made eye contact with me that it was giving me some sort of a message, not exactly in English, but I knew what it was trying to tell me. And these things range from don't tell anyone you saw me or I'll get you, to I'm superior to you, to I could jump on your car right now if I wanted to, that kind of thing. And that really also upsets people, because it's not the kind of thing that happens when you encounter a normal wild animal. You may have a fright or flight reaction where you're either afraid of it. If you're walking through a woods and all of a sudden you're 10 feet from a grizzly, you're going to be scared out of your wits, and rightly so. But you're probably not going to be thinking that it's looking at you and thinking, you should not tell anyone about me. It's just ludicrous when you think about it that way. So, and people recognize that this is something very unusual, and again, it's something that sets it apart from normal animals.
Have you ever come across this type of creatures yourself?
Um, well, talking about just the upright canines,
Hmm.
I've had some incidents with Bigfoot because I've spent a lot of time in the field. I kind of know where they are, where in a certain region, and have some ideas where to look. But I've only had one encounter that I believe was a dog man or an upright canine, because I was at a place with a History Channel cameraman and several witnesses who had seen two different individual upright canines at this spot. Very lonely, isolated spot in Michigan. Very early in the morning, it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, because that's when they had their sighting. We were trying to recreate it. It was very warm and muggy, like 96 degrees, and almost ready to rain. And so we'd been watching for hours. We'd actually been there all day and had some weird things happen. We saw eye shine in the bushes, heard something huge shake itself out like a dog would shake itself out, when it's just had a bath. It was setting off motion detector lights, and all of a sudden something ran across the road where we had a spotlight set up, and it was just outside the edge of the spotlight. All I could see was the spine of something. This spine was erect, it was upright, and it was covered with gray fur, heavily covered with gray fur. And then it was out of the spotlight to the other side of the road in no time. But on the other side of the road was a reflective road sign, and it blotted it out momentarily as it passed. And we could kind of hear this, rushing sound as it went across. And when that we went and measured it, and it had to have been 7 feet tall, which was what they had said the creature, what they thought was its height. So that matched up. And one of the other witnesses also saw it. It wasn't just me. And they became so fearful to know that we were out on the road, defenseless with that thing, that they insisted we leave at that moment. So we packed up and left. And wouldn't you know that the cameraman, of course, had his camera pointed the other direction at the time that this ran across. It was almost like it was waiting for the cameraman to turn its camera away, and then
Wow.
it ran across.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And you didn't get any telepathic messages at that time, I assume.
Well, no, it wasn't making eye contact. It was
Mhm.
just, it seemed to me like it really wanted to get across that road, which led to another series of fields and state wilderness area. And it was waiting its chance to do that
Mhm.
without being detected.
Do dogmen, Bigfoots, and other cryptids select a few specific humans and follow them sometimes for years? And if so, why do you think that is?
That's an interesting question, and I'm not sure if people are actually selected, or if they are completely followed. But it seems that at certain times where there seems to be a pack or several of these creatures that are habituating, like a farm or a rural home or something, that one family member will feel like it's targeted. And they do hang around for years in some of those cases. When it comes to just being outright selected, I don't know if that's true, but what does seem true to me after reading many things and having my own experiences is that you can just imagine, um, if something is out in the fields and trying to get around without being seen, it would become wary of what people are around and what they're looking at. And normally, most people are driving down a road. They're not looking at the scenery. They're just going, they're thinking their own thoughts. Somebody could be standing right there and it might not be seen at all. But when somebody sees one of these things and then becomes aware, and you're always looking, if you tend to go by the same spots, this thing is going to be aware. And I think sometimes it may test people that it realizes are looking or paying more attention to where it is than the normal human, and that they're sort of checking it out and making sure there isn't a threat there. That's just my own opinion that from things I've read and things I've experienced.
Right. Have Do you think that the dogmen are genetically created naturally or issued from secret military experiments?
Well, those are two of the theories that I hear about a lot. I don't claim to know where exactly they come from. My first thought way back when was that they had just sort of naturally mutated to have larger paws, which is a simple mutation, just for a creature to have bigger paws than it had had. And then it was so successful for them to be able to stand upright because they had better balance. They found that they were able to better access food, that they could stand up and see things coming, that they could run in certain terrains, and just get say 2 feet wet and muddy rather than all four. They didn't have to drag things with their mouth necessarily anymore, that there would have been more offspring, and through natural adaptation, um, they sort of spread. So that's one possibility. These days with military, I used to poo-poo that a lot more than I do now because genetic research and our abilities to do things with genetics have improved so much over the last quarter century. And that's what we're talking about since my knowledge of them. And I know they had been around earlier than that, that it's possible there are places where people have tried to, splice genes and end up with a canine that's not only large, but perhaps has a better back and skeletal structure for walking upright, and that it seems more easy for this to happen with a certain gene structure. So that for all I know, it could be possible. I do believe there's a lot more advanced technique going on in the world of genetics among governments than we are privileged to know of as ordinary citizens. So, I can't put that out of mind. A lot of people do suggest that perhaps they come from another planet, like the Bigfoots.
Hmm.
There are sometimes many associations with light forms, not so much um, nuts and bolts craft, but with light forms and things that suggest portals or other dimensions. Maybe that they're coming from some parallel world that has a thin doorway here and there, or window areas, as John Keel used to call them. So these are all possibilities that people mention. Native American friends that I have interviewed in different states and throughout different tribes usually tell me the same thing, which is they feel that these creatures, the Bigfoot and the Dogman, are from what they call the spirit world, or we might call, a portal world or another dimension or something like that, and that they can go back and forth, but they can do that when it's handy and they're shot, for instance, and they don't want the bullet to take effect. They can go back, hop back into whatever portal needs to be there and get away. And that is why so often when people have gone ahead and shot them because they were feeling threatened or whatever, the bullets don't seem to have any effect in many cases, and they
That
won't
was
even
my
find
next
a blood
question.
trail.
That was my
Oh,
next question, actually. Yeah, yeah,
I
it
must be
is.
psychic.
Yes, you are. The question was,
Just
have
kidding.
they been shot at and fought against or hurt, left dog hair or blood behind them, trailed blood, and you're answering it. So yeah, bullets don't seem to do anything to them.
No, it's like they have Kevlar vests on under their fur, and the only way to explain this, to my mind, is if you accept the theory that perhaps wherever they are coming from or originally came from was perhaps at a different vibrational level, talking about atomic structure that I won't get into, that, maybe they exist, they're more visible at a certain um, level of light vibration. I don't know what it would be technically, but it's just enough so that they can foil our cameras, because our cameras and optical devices are invented to service both our eyesight and whatever light vibration our world is operating at. Something that comes from a place a little different might not show up on our electronic devices. I don't know if
Yeah.
that, but it also, I'm sorry, it should also help explain then why perhaps a bullet could go right through it or not seem to injure it to the same extent that something flesh and blood in our own natural world would expect.
Yes, maybe they're not vibrating at the same frequency as our 3D dimension, and
Right.
they haven't morphed totally 100% in our dimension, and maybe they're halfway between the astral realms or another dimension than ours. But some well, I've heard a couple of shows where some dogmen have been seen crossing the road in military uniforms, which is quite amazing. It reminds me of, I don't know, werewolf stories or like super soldiers and some sci-fi movies. Or
Right.
have they been? Well, some have been seen in military uniforms, or have some been seen during some transformation process, like changing from men into werewolves, for example, or dogmen, or.
Well, yeah, yes, and yes. I
Mhm.
have occasionally received reports, and I've seen them other places, particularly out in western desert areas where there are military installations. I had one from a family that was driving through and saw a Jeep full of what they thought were just ordinary soldiers, and then as they got closer, they realized that these so-called soldiers all had dog heads as they were driving along. My latest book, Monsters Among Us, has several episodes, not only talking about some military areas, but several instances where people did see this morphing process occur. And I might add that in my own research, that's fairly rare and um, just didn't seem to happen in most cases that people um, wrote me about. I've received more of those in recent years, and the book I just finished that isn't out yet, maybe in the next year it'll be coming out, has a number of these connections with military sites and the creatures. And there are some different reasons for that. But I generally, when I get a report, I try to notice, I go either go to online maps or my favorite old atlases. I still just love the old-fashioned paper atlases. They can show you things in a whole different way than you get just online. And I try to see what is surrounding this sighting. Is there any sort of geological or geographical feature? You know, is there quartz in the ground there? Are there mountains? Or what type of human cultural artifacts are there? In other words, are there graveyards? Are there ancient sacred sites or ancient Native American grave sites? Are there roadways that have a lot of crossroads, which reflect the same sort of thing that happens in Europe, especially in England? The crossroads are famous for places where werewolves and other things like that hang out. Are there military installations? And very often, all of these types have very higher than usual clusters of all types of strange creatures. I don't know if they are more subject to portal areas or if there are um, rituals or other types of things that can be called out. And there's one other type, particularly in the United States, which is around areas of native reserve land. And very often, um, who have seen them around these areas will report a different sort of creature. It's an upright canine, but its body is more humanoid. It has shoulders, much more defined muscles, usually less shaggy, usually black fur, very high pointed ears. Some people will compare it to the Egyptian god of the dead, Anubis, which was the jackal headed sort of god. It looks different. And this type, people believe, may be more like a human shapeshifter that can shift into these shapes. Turns out to be a tongue twister there.
Right.
um, yeah, which again is what I was meaning in the beginning by talking about different types of the upright canines, because they think that the ones that come from these other dimensions were never human. They think that these were there's the Anubis coming up on the screen.
Hmm.
Yeah, they think that these were always some type of a canine that just comes from somewhere else. But then you have vice versa, the humans that either know how to, through ritual or other means, thought projection, are able to appear to be creatures, but you know, in the beginning they were humans trying to be something else.
Right, and this is not the way to fight them. That's what I tried at the Universal Studios back in the 90s. It didn't work out. That's part of the Mummy, the movie artifact.
Right.
And
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
it's pretty amazing that Anubis actually is connected to this kind of creature. Actually, I talked to a British abductee called Sharon, and she actually wrote to you, I think, but you maybe you haven't noticed her email, her testimony, but she testified on a channel called Dogman Encounters, I think, with Vic Cundiff, and she was telling me that the Dogman, that's her opinion, based upon
Hmm.
her encounter that left her frightened for life. Actually, she's also an ET
Sure.
abductee. It has been for years, for decades. She says that the Dogman were also originally from another dimension and enslaved the Egyptians over 2,000 years ago. They captured some, and yes, then did genetic experiments to improve them and have human DNA in them too. And they are the super soldiers. And the guns do not always kill them. Many people think they're spirits, demons, walkers, etc., but they are not and are very real. That's what she's saying, and they're now being seen all over the world, but are tracked if they get out of hands by the military that train them. They live underground mainly in the U.S., but has an experiment been placed all over the world, test subjects to see if they can live here and not be seen. And they also microchipped so they can be placed in areas as in an order at the moment. If they kill, which many have, they are killed or taken back to a facility inside a mountain in the U.S. on all four corners of the U.S. That's what she's saying.
Hmm.
And she wrote to warn a man called Jack Carey, but everyone seems to think they know what it's all about. And there's one man in Tennessee that recently asked her to remote view his property for Dogman, and she gave him accurate results of area tracks, dens, etc., of a Dogman. So she was amazed. He was amazed, and he thinks that she's been very helpful, and now he's safe. But she's sure that he would confirm that, and would take an interview, of course, well, with you or anybody else about his experiences. But anyway, just to let us know, she says that she talks about the skinwalkers.
Hmm.
Those Indians. I think there were some Native Americans that are named themselves skinwalkers, but also named this type of creatures skinwalkers, right?
Right. Right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and again, this is a different type of creature because it is something that comes from ritual actions and things that I don't usually get into in specific detail, but that are known to people who seek them out. And this involves a human being that either partially able to transform himself. More often, I think it has to do with projecting an image of themselves, projecting some sort of an astral body, or what there are different terms for it, whatever you want to call it, psychic energy, mental energy, thought forms. They're called tulpas in Tibet, for
Mhm.
instance. But the skinwalkers are known in this country for usually having a more malign or evil, sinister thing about them. They're usually there to go and do things to people that you wouldn't want done to yourself. So they're very fearful. People, Native Americans that I know who know about these things, say you shouldn't even really talk about them or say their names. They could be attracted to you for that. They are aligned to many of the Western United States tribes. They're
Mhm.
different from the normal medicine men or shamans that normally, practice the Native American religion and try to heal people and do good. It's a different offshoot sort of thing. And again, it's um, more of a human showing up as a creature rather than the creature trying to disguise itself as human, or a creature that always was, you know, a canine of some sort.
Right. So there may be there's types of dogmen and werewolves. You know, like maybe super soldiers on one hand, and otherworldly,
Right.
ghostly demon projections into werewolves. Or what do you think of those reports of the black shucks? You've heard of them, right?
Right. The black
Mhm.
shuck, the phantom dogs of well, originally of the UK is where that term came from. The black shucks. They have different deer trash, padfoots. They have different names for them in different parts of England, Scotland, and Ireland. And the thing is that these black phantom dogs, that's another type, are also seen in the US and other places around the world. Canada, again, especially. And these often, they don't always walk on their hind legs. Instead, they might be just huge, like say the size of a calf, or some people will say a Shetland pony. They very often have black fur, but the fur can vary in color. The thing with them, that distinguishes them a little bit, and also the skinwalkers, is that those creatures will have bright red eye shine. When a light is shined at them in the dark, what glows back, or sometimes just glows by itself, is this bright red light, kind of orangey red sometimes. And with all the other upright canines, I'd say 90% of the so-called normal, if you can call them normal, upright canines, the ones people see along the road, whatever, they almost always are identified by having the normal canine color of eye shine, which would be yellow, yellow, green, something like that. So it's the red eyes. They're huge. They're furry. Sometimes they pass through walls. When one of these things walks through a wall and shows up in your bedroom and looks at you, you know that you're not dealing with a normal timber wolf that can just run around on its hind legs. It's an entirely different phenomenon. It's just that they both look like canines.
Right, right. So basically, if what can kill those creatures basically, or is it are they? I mean, it's not like in the werewolf, sci-fi movies with silver bullets and all this stuff.
Right.
Um, have any of them been captured or killed, or do you have any testimonies of that?
There are a few testimonies, yeah, here and there. You see it where people say that they have killed it or something, but most of the ones that I've heard about, or where people have either reported to me, or I've read about them or seen it, is that rather than be killed, if anything, if they're like a skinwalker or that sort of thing, they may lose the animal form and then go back to, their normal human form. That's one thing that can happen. I did have a person, after I had given a talk one night at a library in Wisconsin. Someone was kind of lingering around to talk to me till most people had gone, and he came up, and he was an older farmer, and he said, I've never told anyone this, but I'm pretty sure I shot one of these wolfmen on my farm. Now, he was in a high sightings area where there were lots of sightings of these upright canines. And he said, I shot it. It was dead. And you know what? He said, when it was dead, it just looked like this big dead wolf. And of course, it was legal to shoot wolves. He said, I didn't want to pay a high fine, get my vehicle taken, and all that. So I just buried it. And I asked him if he could take me to where he buried it, just in case there were bones or, something
Mhm.
left there, because it had been a few years before that he said this happened. And he just kind of looked at me and said, no, he said, I can't say any more about it to you. That's it. I just wanted you to know that there was one, and I shot it and I buried it.
Well,
So
he didn't want to mention where exactly, right?
no,
That's
he was terrified of getting into legal trouble over it,
oh,
and he
right,
also didn't want people to really know. He didn't want his neighbors to know that, just in
right.
case they would think he was crazy, of course.
There's an Anubis statue located at the Denver airport that looks like a dog man. You've seen that one
Mm-hmm.
at the Denver airport, but there's
Yeah,
many strange things
yeah,
going on there. But
I've seen pictures of that. Yeah, and I've heard about that Denver airport too. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, it's I'm not sure why that particular statue is up. I can't remember at the moment, but it
mm.
does seem odd. I'll say that.
There are many odd things at the Denver airport, and probably an underground
Yes.
military base as well. Um,
Probably. There's a lot of underground. installation in this country, if we had, and now we do have cameras that can see, from above and aim down and see where these things are. It shows up, where there is something underground. You're starting to see that on the reality TV shows where they go hunting for treasures and archaeological discoveries.
Right.
And I think if somebody could really get one that mapped everything, you would be astounded, because even, let's just go back to Little Wisconsin. Most cities of any size have underground areas under their entire downtowns, and people don't realize this, but they were there. You can still find access to them. There's a huge military installation that was going in to southeastern Wisconsin, an Air Force base between Racine and Burlington, that has now, they stopped it just at the last moment before the concrete was to be poured for all of the runways, and it was left open accidentally so people could get in there for years, and it went for huge areas of space that nobody knew what they were planned to be used for. For some reason, the project was stopped, and it's called the Bong Air Force Base, named after a World War II war hero whose last name was Bong, and it was just stopped. It's a complete mystery, and it's a very high sighting spot for dogmen, black panthers, strange flying things, you name it. I knew 2 policemen who had seen a dogman type of creature, a canine running upright in that recreational area at least twice, and another man who saw a black panther. His whole family saw it on a different occasion. They're not supposed to exist, but people do see them too.
Well, do you think they allow a few to come up from the ground to scare people out and away from the national parks because of them protecting their secrets? Or there's a lot of people vanishing in national parks. Actually, there's this retired police
Right,
officer. I forgot his name. I talk about him a lot, though. In 30 years of investigations. I mean, he's seen so many weird cases of missing people in parks that are
right,
unexplained. And
right. The missing 411 you're talking about, David
yes,
Paulides.
Politis,
Right.
right, exactly, David Politis, right. Mhm. So, do you think they're being used to actually scare some people off, some parks or forests, or to keep a secret, you know, to keep a secret underground, or extra dimensional portals that they are protecting, for example?
I don't have any way to prove it or say yes, I know that's true, or yes, I definitely that's what's happening. But nothing surprises me anymore. I've just seen enough things and heard enough weird things, that I wouldn't be surprised if you know that those underground facilities are there. And again, I'm just going to say, think of any large city where there are abandoned subways, where
Hmm.
there are abandoned steam tunnels that used to run between any huge hospitals and big institutions, stores, factories, all that sort of thing. Everything was heated by steam and had huge underground tunnels. Sewers, you put all those together, and there's a huge network. And you can't tell me that the military is not aware of that and that they don't utilize parts of those things for themselves, and that other things may not take advantage as well. And they're very hard to pin down. Years ago, an area official from Minot, North Dakota, contacted me and said they'd been getting reports of werewolves or things that look like werewolves living in the sewers of that city. And, I've never found proof for it. I've checked around and not been able to find it. But in Monsters Among Us, I documented a few places in Los Angeles, of all cities, where and again, there are tons of underground things going on there. Again, the subways, tunnels, utilization tunnels, that sort of thing, where I had, some children that reported seeing something come up and change into a werewolf. There's a long-standing I don't know what tradition about a tribe of Native Americans that were known at the time as the lizard people to other Native Americans. And before the settlers came, or right after, there were supposed to have been huge caverns built all under Los Angeles that these technically advanced lizard people tribe undertook to make, and they had a way of melting the stone with some sort of acidic substance so that they didn't have to, carve everything out with picks and hammers, and that these were supposed to still have been there in the early 1900s. And actually, a couple of men were granted a license to dig way down deep through certain points of Los Angeles to try and find them, because they were supposed to be filled with not only treasures of gold, but food supplies and things that would keep 10,000 people safe for many, many years, because they believed cataclysms were coming. And this was from hundreds of years ago. So where did these people have the ideas of this sort of thing even happening? Well, the tunnel diggings weren't successful. They never found these particular caverns, which were supposed to always also have been in the shape of a lizard. And this is well known. It was written about in the Los Angeles newspapers at the time. I've documented it pretty well in the Monsters Among Us book, if anybody's interested in looking, and you can find other things to reference there. But when you realize how many unknown things are underground and in our mountainsides that we know about that are not just legends, you can't see how they would not be utilized by
Right.
something or someone.
Right, for sure. And also, I interviewed, I talked to and interviewed him about a different subject, but he talked a lot about Bigfoot and UFO sightings altogether in California. Actually, Preston Dennett, you've heard of
Oh,
him, right?
sure. He's a friend. Yes, we've
Hmm.
been on each other's radio shows and and kind of keep in touch every once in a while. No, he's a great guy. He has a lot of great researchers,
Hmm.
or great research that he has done, and I always like his books because I always find something surprising and different in them. So no, anything that Preston has done, I admire.
Right, and so he described that there was a UFO sighting, followed by a Bigfoot sighting, and so forth. But which brings us to the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. You've heard of the sightings over there?
Yes, definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah, there have been different people who've written about it. I kind of tend to go back to the original rendition about it. But the reason that I kind of looked a little more deeply into it was that I've had a situation here in southeastern Wisconsin that I call the mini Skinwalker Ranch, because it had many of the same things that were happening, but just on a smaller scale. Now, the Skinwalker Ranch out in Utah lies near several native land reserves, and it is, according to them, supposed to have been cursed for many years, and was also kind of the haunt of a bunch of skinwalkers, and so the native people would generally stay away. But some years ago, a rancher bought the acreage and wanted to raise prize beef cattle there. Almost immediately, really weird things started happening. A giant wolf-like creature that should have been entirely wild walked right up to them as if it was a friend, and then as soon as it got closer, they were off their guard. It turned around and tried to grab one of their prize calves, and make off with it. They saw what could not be described as anything other than the almost uh, well, what most people would think of as an ideal portal, where you're looking at the sky is dark, and yet you see this big opening where the sky is blue, and there are buildings, and it's up in the sky, and has no connection to anything that's around you. And then something black comes out of it and runs away across your land. That sort of thing was happening frequently. He was having complete failures in trying to um, take trail cam photos of it. His family was being threatened by different sorts of beings that they couldn't control or shoot. And he and his families, after not too a few years, moved off the ranch. At least he stayed on, but the family moved off right away. And it was sold to an American science entrepreneur. And he had just top experts, the top of the line electricians electronic recording equipment, scientific experiments planned out to observe and graph and try and record all of these things. And just every time he put those cameras out, no matter how many he put, how they were set up or attached or unattached, it was always just an almost complete failure to ever record anything.
Sort of reminds me of David Jacobs' experiments with abductions, at night, and you would put up cameras, and abductees
Right.
in some rooms would be abducted, and the cameras wouldn't shoot anything. you know.
Exactly. That's
Mm,
precisely, and I've done that myself. And we have this little, I call it jokingly the mini Skinwalker Ranch, but it's 40 some acres that belong to a retired math and physics teacher from Chicago who bought the area about 5 years ago to start just raising hay for his own horses. And it happens to be attached to some other land that's right on Bray Road where these initial happenings began. And he started noticing mutilated carcasses of, just little raccoons and things like that. Um, and then the neighbors told him about the Beast of Bray Road, and he started bringing carcasses from his areas in Illinois and laying them out as bait. And then weirder things began happening. And he asked me to help him out. And so I assisted him for about 3 years with this. And he's got thousands of trail cam photographs. And we would use up to 3 sometimes, on a particular, and you would aim it so you could see the carcass. And it would be working perfectly. And then at some point, sometimes it would just go black, sometimes it would go white, sometimes a mist would appear. You'd still see the picture. It was working, but a mist appeared over the creature to blot it out. And then in the next, it would go for half an hour or so like this, with maybe 90 photographs going, three photographs a minute. And all of a sudden, it would be back to the mist is gone, and so is the bait animal. The deer is completely gone, and all that's left there are canine footprints, and it's been able to have been tracked through a field at least on one occasion, and then it just ends at the roadway where you can't track it anymore. Things like this happened for 3 years straight. They've calmed down a little bit, but there's another section in it where the owner had put out a carcass and nothing was touching it, whereas usually coyotes and things were coming at least, we knew to get things and bigger things, because there would be sometimes where the head would be chopped off and just um, as if it twisted at the neck. It would have had to been something really, really strong to take, a large deer and twist its head off. And we found that, happening. So that sort of thing was going on, but nothing was touching it. And so I suggested that maybe something bigger was coming that was scaring off the local animal population that would devour these carcasses. So I suggested that he and another colleague and I sit out and just do a nighttime stakeout, which I've done from time to time in my career when it seems necessary. And we were sitting there, we weren't seeing anything going near. We were across the field, across this 40-acre field from it. We had a camera set up, but it wasn't, it turned out it wasn't aimed at the right place exactly, so it didn't catch it. But we're sitting there, and this light over the tree line appears. And at first we thought it was an airplane, and then it started making very pronounced movements backwards, not just little jiggles like you see a star twinkling, but it went backwards and then it went up, and then it started coming straight across the field for us, not meandering, not zooming, not just coming at a straight, like, oh, look at those people, they're looking at me and I'm going to see what they are. That's how it felt. It came across the field, and very shortly, we're all kind of, yelling and saying, are you watching that? Are you looking at that? We were all seeing it, trying to get cameras in order. You're trying to get to a position where you can figure out what it is. And it got to within, it was maybe at the most 30, 35, maybe 30 feet from the car and 30 feet up from the ground at
Wow.
the most. It may have been a little closer than that. We agreed that was, the maximum it could have been. And all of a sudden, we're looking at it, and my colleague got kind of nervous, and he picked up a huge flashlight that was lying in the seat between him and the property owner. I was in the back seat trying to get my camera aimed at this thing. And when he shined the flashlight on it, it hung there for just a moment. We all estimated it was white. It was a glowing white sphere that we estimated about the size of a basketball. But it was not glowing to where it lit things up. It just seemed to be sort of internally lit. There was an additional tiny blue light sort of attached to it that we also noticed. But when we did that, we all felt that it was surprised for a moment. It did not instantly disintegrate or be blotted out by the flashlight, which it should have been if it was just some kind of a light or whatever. It hung there for just, a second or so, and then it just sort of imploded on itself. It's
Hmm.
hard to describe it unless you saw it. And at that point, we all yelled our favorite word, whatever that, between the three of us. And of course, it was just when I had put my camera up, and so I did not get the picture, although I was thinking of it and trying to. It was partly because I was in the back seat and it was coming from the wrong direction for me to get the correct angle. And so then we're wishing in retrospect that we had set out 3 ground cams aimed all over the place, but you never know where something like that's going to come from. So it's almost
Right.
impossible to set it up. But yeah, that was impossible to deny. And my friend, the retired math teacher, was yelling, "That's not possible in physics. That's not possible. It's that cannot have happened." And yet it did. We all three saw it, and it was only 2 years ago or so. So
Yeah, so it's kind of
what
like
can you say?
the UFO phenomenon, the crop circle phenomenon.
Right.
They're very stealth, and they don't want to be seen, and they also tell you telepathically not to talk about it, like the Men in Black, for example.
Right.
Sightings. The first one was in the Maury Island incident in 1947. Um, which was admitted in recently, actually last year,
Hmm.
by some local government agency. That, they admitted that the first sighting was there in 1947 for Men in Black, and they try to debunk it for decades. And this couple wrote a book about it to tell the real truth behind the whole story. It's a famous incident, the Maury Island incident,
Right.
UFO incident.
Right.
Um,
I've heard of it.
and there's been a lot of cover up, the same as the UFO connection, and they don't want you to know. The portals seem to be open somehow, and it looks like those wolves are working hand in hands with maybe ETs that are working with the shadow government to keep those portals open and closed and shut whenever it's necessary. I'm going to show you a picture that I came across. Maybe it's a fake. It's another fake or not. A dog man on his 2 back legs. Let's see if I can. Okay, and it comes from the website called North American Dogman Project. I don't know if you know
Hmm.
them.
Yeah, I know of it.
Okay, all
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah. And it does look like there's a figure of what resembles many people's sightings of Dogman. You can see it looks like it has dog-like ears.
Mhm.
Um, it has kind of the bulky shoulder area, and it looks like you can see an arm and some legs. It looks like it is.
Mhm.
There's, unfortunately, to my knowledge, no way to really prove it. Unfortunately, I would never say no, it can't be real because we can't prove it. It
Right.
it it, it could be. I can't say for sure because we don't have the way to definitely get its size or its height or anything like that. Or
Right.
and as Photoshop and other types of video programs keep improving and improving, it gets more and more difficult to just take any still shot and prove that it wasn't dropped in there or somehow added to the picture.
Right.
So all I can say is that whoever took it, if they said they saw it, I can't say I don't believe you. For all I know, you did see it, and it's
Right.
just that unfortunately, it's not provable. But it's not
Right.
it's not the picture's fault.
Yeah, of course. And they mention on the website that it comes from the Redwoods State Park, California, and a hiker encountered a dogman off the trail interacting with other screaming hikers, and the eyewitness saw a large black dogman and snapped a few photos. So, and there's also, let's see, also some possible dogman track in West Virginia in 2018. So I don't know. What do you?
Yeah, and
Same
again,
thing, you know.
it's very large.
Hmm.
I will say that there have also been, I mean, it does look sort of like claw points at the end, but there have been also big footprints
Right.
um, that have 3 or 4 toes,
Hmm.
and other types of prints altogether. It may or may not have been a dog man. It's hard to tell exactly. Um,
Right.
it's a little different than most dog man, because it so forcefully covers that whole foot area, and because it's a flat-footed print, whereas
Hmm.
most the dog men are digitigrade or they walk on their toe pads. But
Hmm.
I have seen numerous Bigfoot stories or reports of unknown creatures that are described just like this, where there are 4 toes. So it could be either one. It's hard to say. It would be better if there were a whole trackway of them and we could observe it. But of course, we never get what we want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have to make do with what people are able to find. But it's a very impressive looking print.
And this
And
one is
yeah,
a
this
yeah. This one is in Oklahoma in 2018. Possible Dogman track. I don't know what to think of it. There's 3 claws. Uh,
right. Yeah, there are these three. People do see things that have um, more reptile type of feet.
mhm.
These 3-toed prints are seen here and there, and this one doesn't look at all Bigfoot to me because no, I think I have seen this one, and I've seen somebody explain it as being deer prints that are stepped kind of one into another.
Mhm.
And I don't know, it looks like they have claws to me, which deer wouldn't have. So I would tend to
Right.
discount that. But that is one explanation that I've seen of this one. It could now see what happens usually with the dog man print. They look canine, which are like if we were walking on our tiptoes and our heel was kind of up in the air, and then we needed to jump, we would have to kind of crouch down and our heels would touch the ground again. Well, they have their hock, it's called the hock that's up in the air. And it's the
Mhm.
same thing if they want to spring after something, this hock comes down and makes that sort of heel-like impression, and it's much more narrow than the heel of, say, a Bigfoot. So it looks to me more like something that's happened that way. And I've seen and photographed some very good dogman photos where there was a sighting by 4 different people,
Mhm.
and then we went searching into a field just to find something, and we found a scene with a big mud puddle where it had been chasing a deer, and the deer sprang out, and then you could see the hawk come down from the canine prints. It was
Mhm.
very, very similar to this. Although I have to say, this looks really huge. I don't know what size that
Right.
boot is there,
Yeah.
but
No.
it looks almost too huge for any of the. It's amazing how big that is.
Yeah, yeah, it is amazing. Well, actually, you can make up, any type of tracks on the snow, by drawing it yourself. My question is also about for example, the Beast of Gévaudan in the old story in France a long time ago. You've mentioned that you knew about that story, which is a very old classic in France. For people who don't know about it. In the U.S. and elsewhere, the Beast of Gévaudan. Gévaudan it's a mystery about a beast in the 18th century, from 1764 to 1767. For 3 years, the historical region of Gévaudan, located in southern France, southeast, and adjacent areas, about 100 children, youths, and women were killed by a so-called beast, and
Hmm.
numerous other humans survived the attacks, many of them seriously injured. The series of attacks have been confirmed by a great variety of historical documents and is not called into question by scientists. Historians claim that wolves or a hybrid of a wolf or a domestic dog had attacked the victims. The hybrid assumption is based on the description of a canid shot in June 1767 that was said to have strange morphological characteristics. However, a critical evaluation of historical texts, including the publication of the French abbot François Fabre and Pierre Porcher, revealed that neither this animal nor any other wolf killed in Gévaudan had anything to do with the attacks of the beast. Nevertheless, there were indeed a few attacks of rabid and non-rabid wolves on humans in Gévaudan at that time. So there's so many stories around this thing, and there's secret societies. There's the king at the time who was against some regional sections of nobilties, and also the clergy, and the priests, and religions was brought into it. There's so much into this story. It's, I don't know what you've heard of it, but there's so many things around this historical and political and religious context back then. Some said it was some type of planning, or maybe a wild beast, imported from Africa, or a hybrid, or something that the king used with a handler, to have many peasants killed, so that they would go into the hands of religion, that protect themselves, and obey the king. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right. Yeah, I did actually try and go to a lot of sources and read and dig into as much as I could find about it. Not without managing to go to France myself, that would have been the ideal, but I couldn't do that. So I spent a lot of time, looking for different, um, just many of the things that you've just mentioned. And I wrote about it in my book, Real Wolfmen: True Encounters in Modern America. And um, what struck me was that there were so many different descriptions of it, and that some people thought it looked like a hyena. I think there was a TV documentary that came up with that particular, um, that affirmed that particular one, that they believed that it was a hyena. Oh, there you have the book. Thank you very much. Um, and then other people believe that there were either one or two animals that were killed, as you said, in 1767 by the Marquis. Now, I cannot pronounce French very well. It's D apostrophe APCHER on June 19th. Legend has it that he shot the creature in the heart with silver bullets he made from a consecrated chalice. And then what they know is a large dead wolf was displayed in area villages, but they don't know if it was one wolf or two wolves, or if it was pure wolf, if it did look like a hyena. The one big difference that really separates the Beast of Gévaudan from the Beast of Bray Road, the Michigan Dogman, and all the other creatures that have been seen, there were supposedly, um, that have been all over the United States, is that in France, back in that time, as you said, there were a lot of people killed. It had victims. And the weird thing about these upright canines or dogmen is that only in a very, I could name them on one or two fingers of one hand, the accounts that are supposed to have been resulted in killings, and one was the well-known Land Between the Lakes, down in um, the southern area of the United States, where a family was supposed to have been camping. Yeah, there you've got the great picture of the giant. Really, that's a giant-sized wolf attacking this lady. But a family in a camper was supposed to have been massacred, and then it was covered up by the government. And then there was another one in Kentucky, written by my good friend Barton Nunnally, where a family was attacked, and I not massacred, but attacked and had to defend themselves. This is really not how, probably 99.9% of the sightings go. The sightings that we have in these contemporary days, people may be chased by the creatures. They may feel that the creature is lunging at it and could eat them if it wanted to, or that it could break into the house if it wanted to. They're caught out. One man was caught out on a trail in Quebec province in Canada, and I was just walking unarmed and came face to face with an upright canine. And he told me he looked at it looked at him, and then he thought it was going to lunge at him, but instead it just went off in a slightly different direction. It did happen to graze his side and rib cage with its fangs. He had to go get stitches and told them it was a bear because he didn't think they would believe him. That's the only report I've ever had to me, and he thought it was incidental. He thought the creature was just trying more to scare him, and he said at that range, if it had wanted to knock him down and eat him, it easily could have done that. It just wanted to really scare him and get away, and that's what happens in almost every case. People are frightened, and then they turn around and it's just gone diving into the bushes or running the other way. It just mostly seems, almost territorial, like it's trying to get them out of my space. Get out of here. This is where I live. I don't want you on this road or in these woods or whatever. That's how it seems in almost every case in the contemporary sightings, which is very, very different to whatever this thing was that was eating people and also their sheep and their livestock too.
So, are there any for humans deadly encounters today that have been reported? Well, not from the dead people, of course, but others and family
Well,
members,
yeah,
friends.
like yeah, a lot of times I say unless there were people who didn't learn to or who didn't live to tell the tale. But those ones I just mentioned, the land beyond between the lakes and the family home up in Kentucky, the scratching kind of slash on the side that of the man up in Canada are some of the few that I know of. They're very, very rare. It doesn't seem to happen the same way, which makes me think that they are either different creatures or have some sort of different origin, but they don't seem the same as that beast of Gévaudan or some of the other people who were claimed to be werewolves or were killed for during the witch and werewolf trials that happened during before the centuries just before the Beast of Gévaudan in Europe were also quite different. They would look like humans, but that they also did actually go and kill people. There was a young man named Jean Grenier that was very famous for that and was imprisoned for it and died. So they seem like different things to me.
Right, right, and the lycanthropy pathology is actually real. It's been diagnosed in psychiatry. Men who
Right.
think they're wolves and actually commit a crime or kill others, thinking that they're wolves and they're hunting them down.
Right, and yeah, there is that is also kind of a separate category too. It's a known psychological circumstance where people they can look in a mirror and see themselves fully furred as a wolf, and everybody else can be looking at them and see them just as a naked human. And that's one of my books. I can't remember which one. I found this priceless, although excuse me, kind of sad story about a woman who unfortunately had that affliction, and she was at a family dinner and felt herself changing into a wolf. And to herself, she looked at her arms and things, and they looked hairy, and everybody else said, "Oh, Auntie's turning into a wolf again," but she could only see a naked lady.
Mm.
And I've heard of other incidents like that where people do have the psychological traumatic problem, and then that's how it works. Although um, I have other anecdotal evidence that says people who are on LSD can see other people turning into wolves, which also makes sense because that's something that is again in their own heads, and they're seeing a hallucination of it in that case.
Right.
So there are all many different ways to approach these things and say, is it this, is it that? And you can sort out that there are different types, but unless it's a psychological type of thing, it's really hard to say for sure, what it
Yes.
was.
Has there been any close-up encounters to where the humans, the witness would actually feel the skin or touch the creature?
Not feeling or touching it, but I do have a couple of really scary ones that are again the Monsters Are Among Us book. One happened in Los Angeles, and it was a young girl and her brother who were playing in an alley behind a laundromat while their mother was doing laundry, and they were throwing a ball back and forth there, and they saw a lid come up in the street of where they were, and there was a man looking at them, and he was gesturing for them to come over by him, and the little girl walked closer, and he knew her name, which made her stop. She thought she remembered her brother hadn't said her name at all, so she's thinking, how did he know that? And he wanted her still to come closer, and then as she didn't get very close, but she said all of a sudden he started looking a little different, and she could see that he had hair growing on him, and he appeared to be turning into something else, and he was saying something like, "Oh no, not now, not now." but he couldn't help turning. And she went with her brother and ran into the laundromat, and that um, street door was closed when they went back, so they never saw it again. But her brother remembered it. Her mother would never go back to the same laundromat, although she didn't see it. She believed both of her frightened children. There was
Right.
another incident in that book where a family church in Illinois, and they made me promise not to give the church location. And the church, actually, it turns out it was there, but it's not there any longer. It was made part of another building, um, and they didn't want their name said. But I interviewed these people 3 times in person. Took my husband along for extra set of eyes. He's pretty good at that sort of thing. Um, Interviewed them separately, got sketches from them. They signed an affidavit saying that they were telling the truth. They're a great middle-aged couple. He was a decorated Vietnam veteran, had very nice children. Why, these people are not going to make something like this up, but they saw a woman in their church that they did not know well. She had just come a few times, who was sitting across from them in a front U-shaped pew, start twitching and suddenly stand up. It was at the end of the sermon, right after the pastor was leaving the pulpit. Stand up, unleash this unearthly scream, and then almost instantly they said she was a wolf-like creature covered in gray fur, except her feet were more like hooves than like paws. And
Wow.
she they were sitting there paralyzed with fear. It happened to be a time when people were looking in their hymn books to start the song portion of the service. So not everybody was looking up and saw it, but almost immediately it happened that there were ushers up at the front. The 3 or 4 ushers rushed the woman, got her down on the pew. Once they did that, they said she turned back into a woman. She still had all her clothing on. It was just like this wolf suit had simultaneously covered her, and
Right.
the ushers got her away out of the pulpit. They said she was taken to some institution somewhere. They weren't able to learn where it was, but
Mhm.
every other detail that they gave me of time, place, etc., checked out completely. And believe me, I spent a lot of time checking this one out before I put it in the book. But
Well, that's
it's just,
impressive. Yeah.
yeah, it was very impressive. They didn't touch her, though. I can guarantee you that.
Right. It's a dog woman. It was a dog woman encounter, in
Yes.
that case. So that's really really strange, and frightening. Actually, it leaves a scary feeling to the experiences that come across. The British lady Sharon that I mentioned earlier, she told me this. Let me tell you this about that beast. When it looked into my eyes just before I ran, it was doing telepathic communication with me, and it told me that it will find me again in the future. Now it has my scent, and so basically she's scared for life of running into that creature again, because telepathically
Yeah.
it told her that it had her scent, and it can find her anywhere in future from now on.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't remember receiving a letter from a person named Sharon that I usually try to answer every letter that I get. Sometimes it takes me a while if I happen to get a batch and it's during a time when I've got conferences. It can take a few weeks or a month or two, but I do try to get back to people. So if she's still out there, I'd still love to hear from her. And if you don't
Yeah.
mind my mentioning, if people are wondering where they can reach me, I have a form on my blog, which is simply lindagodfrey.com.
Mm-hmm. LindaGodfrey.com, and I'll put up what your website on the
Thank you.
interview and so forth. And for a conclusion, because I know you need to go, you have some things to attend to right now. I Let me mention Irish cryptids like fairies, leprechauns, and so forth. They usually consider them in Ireland as demons. The changeling phenomenon with
Right.
fairies and so forth. Um, why in other countries, for example, fairies are, shown into Disney movies, like great, brilliant, positive creatures, and
Yeah.
why is that? Why is it in island traditions? There are demons trying to kidnap the baby boys and take them into their world, and and the leprechauns, sort of like demons as well. Why is that? And that outside of Ireland, they're considered differently.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I am part Irish. I
Hmm.
have Irish and English in my heritage, and I think that for a long time they were recognized as a part of nature or a part of something else that was to be respected and sort of feared. But um, it seemed like around the early 1900s there was sort of a movement to romanticize the idea of fairies and little gentle nature spirits and things like that. And there were some there was a very famous incident where a couple of young sisters were said to have photographed fairies, but they were just taking little cutouts and putting them in the grass, but it was kind of a big deal, and people liked that, and um, the idea where of the nice fairy godmother in Cinderella. I think it just sort of came out of this desire to just romanticize the idea of them. But yeah, many of the ancient traditions of fairies, fae folk of all different kinds, elves, gnomes, whatever, um, usually they were always treated with a very healthy respect by people who believed in them and knew about them. And I think the idea that they're all benevolent, although you can usually find benevolent stories about just about any sort of creature. There are even a few benevolent dogman stories, that I've
Hmm.
received. One was from a woman who actually got lost overnight in a forested area in the Hawaiian Islands, which you don't think of as having forests, but they do.
Hmm.
They've got sort of, tropical forest areas. And she said a dogman came and watched over her during the night and then led her back to the road in the morning. So, and she said it wasn't like a phantom type of thing. She believed it was a true flesh and blood, and there do seem to be some that I've had a few people say, it. One woman who was driving into a cornfield to take her husband his lunch, a farmer, and it crossed right in front of her car in broad daylight, just a few feet away, and she said, "I wasn't afraid. I felt that I was." Gifted something to have seen this amazing, amazing creature. And I do sometimes hear it's not fair to say that they are all, slavering beasts with, drool and blood coming off of them. Some are, many, many times people are very, very frightened, but not in every possible case. There are times when people take it as a good thing or a glad thing.
After all those
So I
years
don't know
of
if that answers your question.
yes, it does. Thanks. After all those years of investigation from your perspective, at the age of VR, virtual reality, quantum physics about our holographic universe, 4D and tactile holograms, they're available now.
Right.
Um, what's the intention behind this phenomenon? Do you think some of them are holographic illusions or projections, or real flesh and bone beings, or a bit of both at times?
Well, some people still insist that they're completely flesh and blood, and they may be. Again, I don't claim to know for sure. Same with the Bigfoot. There's been a huge argument over flesh and blood or spirit creatures for many, many years. I tend to go personally with the idea that's more like the Native American, which is that um, energy comes, and life energy especially comes on sort of a continuum. It's not either just one or completely the other. That the same way in which you have a light spectrum, we don't have just light and blackness. There's all shades of light and color in between. And the same with sound. You've got infrasound and ultrasound, and a lot of different, there's a sound scale in between. And I think it must be that way with life energy too, in my own personal opinion. And that is how you can have something that can be flesh and blood while it's on this earth and then go back to this other dimension or spirit world, and be able to get around in both.
Right.
I have had one really interesting that came to me. I think it was maybe a year ago. It's going to be in the next book. Was a man who was out walking and was in a park, and he saw some animals coming toward him, and it turned out to be several large dogs that he said were running along in exact lockstep and would turn their heads at the same time. Everything that one did, what the other one did. And then he also saw some people doing that too. And he didn't know if they were clones or part of a mind control experiment or what it was, but it shocked him greatly, and he said, whatever it wasn't natural. How do we interpret that? I have no idea. I don't know what advantage that would be for military. They would probably have better ideas about it than I do. But people keep seeing these things, and that people say, well, why do you keep writing about this? Well, it's because people keep seeing the things. I still have that reporter blood in me, and I want to examine them and lay them out and then let people make up their minds about what these extraordinary things are that are happening all over the world, and what they might be and what they might mean for humanity.
We're flesh and bone and blood as well, and flesh and blood, and we are part of the experiment of this mass hypnosis and fear mongering campaigns that we're going through, throughout centuries, and everything seems to loop around, and we're creating loosh. It's a loosh game, like Robert Monroe would say. The loosh is the collective human energy that's produced through suffering and so forth, that some parasites are feeding off of us. So if we're food for all the sources, but our spirits is of the gods, like some say, and to a degree, it is like some type of Truman Show or TV show. Thank you so much for your time today, and it was an amazing interview that I had the privilege to conduct with you. What are your upcoming venues and projects, shows or books? You mentioned a book that is about to close. You're about to close on.
Yes, I have a book that's it's at the publisher. I don't know exactly what the publication date is going to be, when they're going to bring it out, but I'm hoping in the next year. And they don't want me to use the title of it yet, but it has some things I haven't really written about much that are kind of shocking. So just keep an eye out again at lyndagodfrey.com. lyndagodfrey.com. There will be things there. And I also, if you scroll down on the main page, I have some listings of places I'm going to be. I'm going to be June 6th, 7th, June 8th and 9th. I'm going to be up in Menominee, Michigan, which is kind of a twin city with Marinette, Wisconsin, at a conference. I'm going to be in Grand Haven, Michigan. I'm going to be at the huge Michigan Paracon up in Sault Ste. Marie, one of the biggest. They usually have, I think they had 1,500 attendees last year, and just some amazing people there in August. And you could just look up MI Paracon and Google that, and you'll find all you need to know. I'm going to be at one in Kentucky coming up in September. Looking forward to that, Frankfort, Kentucky. So that should all be, everything you want to know should be at lyndagodfrey.com.
Great. It was awesome, and there's so much cryptids in French mythological history, and in all regions of France. I mean, I was amazed to discover some monstrous statues and of cryptids all over the place, and there's so many stories behind it. There's lots to write about, but to get people in France to testify about anything, it's a big challenge. I'm telling you, it's quite challenging.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I think everywhere people are the same.
Right.
They don't want to be made fun of. They would prefer to be in denial, but normally people are just so glad to get it off their chest. They will say, I just wanted to tell one person who wouldn't say I was crazy.
Yeah.
And then they feel better.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, it's the same thing with the UFO phenomenon. Thank you so much, Linda. I know you have to go, and it was a great pleasure, and would love to have you on next time for your upcoming book, and
that would be great.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and thanks to your listeners too.
Thank you. Take care.